Clara had always been known as the quiet girl of the small town. She lived in a little wooden house on the edge of town with her sick mother. The house was old, the roof leaked when it rained, and the walls carried cracks that told stories of many winters and storms. Clara never complained about it. She worked long hours at the town diner, wiping tables, serving plates of food, and smiling at strangers, even when her feet ached and her back felt heavy. She did not earn much, but every dollar she earned went to pay for her mother's medicine, food, and the small rent they owed. Every morning, Clara woke up early, washed her mother's face gently, prepared a simple breakfast, and walked quickly to the diner before the sun rose high in the sky. She wore the same 2 dresses most of the time. They were clean and patched many times, but some people in town made cruel comments about them. "Look at her," whispered one woman in the diner. "She doesn't even own a proper dress." Others laughed, calling her poor and unworthy. Clara heard every word, but she never let them see her sadness. She only lowered her eyes, took a deep breath, and continued serving coffee with the same gentle smile. The town was small, but it had people with big pride. Wealthy women often came to the diner, wearing fine clothes, golden bracelets, and fancy hats. They treated Clara as if she was invisible. Sometimes they mocked her directly, saying things like, "A girl like you will never know the life of comfort." Clara's heart would tighten, but she held on to her dignity. She told herself, "I may not have riches, but I have honesty, hard work, and love for my mother." Those thoughts gave her strength to keep going. Unknown to Clara, a new man had returned to town. His name was Jonathan Hayes. He was a tall, strong ranch owner with deep brown eyes that carried wisdom and a calm strength. He had once lived in the city, running businesses and meeting wealthy families, but he had grown tired of the fake smiles and shallow conversations of that life. He wanted peace, land, and honest people, so he came back to his family's ranch. A wide stretch of green fields, horses, and open skies. His return became the talk of the town. Everyone wanted to impress him, especially the wealthy families. They thought of him as the richest man in the area. One evening, Clara was busy at the diner. The rush of customers filled the air with noise. The smell of roasted meat and fresh bread floated from the kitchen, and laughter from groups of men echoed around. Clara moved from table to table quickly, balancing plates and refilling glasses. Her hair was tied back neatly, and though her dress was plain, her eyes shone with warmth. She approached a table by the window where a man had just taken a seat. He was dressed in simple clothes, not too different from any traveler, but there was something commanding in his presence. Clara greeted him kindly. "Good evening, sir. What would you like to have?" The man looked at her with interest. He noticed her calm voice, the respect in her words, and the way she stood tall even though others had just mocked her moments ago. "A cup of coffee and your special dish of the day," he said with a gentle smile. Clara nodded and went to bring his order. As she walked away, some wealthy lady sitting nearby whispered, "Can you imagine? A poor girl like her serving such a man? She should not even dream of talking to someone important." Their laughter reached Clara's ears, but she kept her face composed. She served the man his meal carefully, thanking him when he smiled again. The man was none other than Jonathan Hayes. He had watched the scene unfold. He had noticed how the other women mocked Clara, and how she carried herself with quiet strength, not replying with anger or tears. This was different from the behavior he had seen among the so-called high-class families who often demanded attention. He thought to himself, "This young woman has dignity. She works hard, and she doesn't let cruelty break her spirit." After finishing his meal, Jonathan placed money on the table, far more than the cost of the food. Clara quickly noticed and said softly, "Sir, this is too much. I cannot accept it. Let me bring you the right change." Jonathan looked at her firmly and replied, "It is not charity. It is for the service you gave. Keep it." For a moment their eyes met, and Clara felt an odd warmth in her chest, but she simply nodded and thanked him with sincerity. That night, after the diner closed, Clara walked home under the dim street lamps. She carried a small bag of bread for her mother. Her steps were tired, but her heart felt lighter. She thought about the stranger who had spoken to her kindly. She had no idea that this man would change her life forever. Meanwhile, the gossip in town grew louder. People spoke of Jonathan Hayes, the wealthy rancher, and how he had been seen eating at the diner. The wealthy ladies who once never cared about Clara now whispered jealously, "Did you see how he looked at her? But she is too poor. He will never waste his time on her. They laughed, but deep inside they were worried. Clara, however, thought of none of that. When she reached home, she warmed the bread and gave it to her mother. Her mother smiled weakly and held Clara's hand. "My child," she whispered, "you work so hard for me. One day life will reward your kindness." Clara smiled faintly and kissed her mother's forehead. She didn't believe in grand rewards. She only believed in duty and love. Still, as she lay in bed that night, she thought of the man at the diner. She wondered who he really was. She had no clue that the world she knew was about to change, and the cruel laughter she had endured for so long would soon turn into silence. The next morning, Clara woke before sunrise, as she always did. She boiled water for tea, prepared a small bowl of porridge for her mother, and set out her plain blue dress for work. The sky outside was still gray, but she knew she had no time to waste. Her mother tried to protest. "You work too hard. Clara, rest a little longer." Clara only smiled gently and replied, "Don't worry about me, Mama. As long as you are cared for, I can handle everything else." Her words were soft, but inside she carried a heavy weight. She was tired, often exhausted, but she never let her mother see her struggles. As Clara walked through the quiet streets toward the diner, a group of townspeople crossed her path. Some of them nodded politely, but others made comments she pretended not to hear. "There goes the poor girl again," one woman whispered. "Always in the same dress. She'll never rise above her station." Another chuckled. "She should be grateful if anyone even notices her." Clara kept her eyes forward and her steps steady. She had learned long ago that reacting to mockery only made it worse. She carried her dignity like armor, though it grew heavier with each passing day. At the market that morning, Clara stopped briefly to look at shoes. Her old pair had worn thin, and the soles were beginning to break. She picked up a pair of second-hand shoes, touching them with hope. Before she could even ask the price, two wealthy women nearby burst into laughter. "Those are not for you," one said loudly. "Even second-hand is too fine for a girl like you." The shopkeeper, embarrassed by their cruelty, tried to shush them, but their voices carried. Clara's cheeks grew warm, yet she simply set the shoes back down and thanked the shopkeeper kindly before walking away. She reminded herself of her mother's words, "Silence is stronger than anger." What Clara did not notice was that Jonathan Hayes had been standing nearby. He had come to the market early to purchase supplies for his ranch. He had seen the scene unfold, the way Clara quietly accepted humiliation without lowering herself to respond, the way her eyes showed sadness, but her back remained straight. Jonathan's chest tightened with both admiration and pity. He thought, how many times has she faced this? And still she chooses grace. Later that day, Jonathan went to the diner again. He chose the same table by the window where the light poured in and waited. Clara came over, her face surprised but calm. "Good afternoon, sir," she greeted, her voice steady even though she remembered his kind words from the night before. "Would you like the same order as yesterday?" Jonathan nodded, watching her closely. "Yes, and perhaps if you are not too busy, could you tell me about this town?" Clara hesitated, then smiled politely. She was not used to customers wanting conversation, especially not with her. As Clara served him, a group of wealthy women sat across the room, their sharp eyes fixed on her. They whispered among themselves, "Look at her. She thinks she can talk to him. She doesn't know her place." Their laughter stung, but Clara focused on Jonathan's questions. She told him about the history of the town, the way winters were harsh and how the community depended on one another during hard times. She spoke softly but with warmth, her hands busy carrying trays while her voice painted pictures of life in the small town. Jonathan listened with genuine interest. He asked about her family, and Clara hesitated before answering. "It's just me and my mother. She is unwell, so I take care of her." She said it without self-pity, only as a simple truth. Jonathan admired that about her. So many others in his life had always exaggerated their troubles to seek sympathy or favor. But this young woman spoke with dignity, not asking for anything, only sharing what was real. Later that evening, as Clara wiped down tables, she overheard the wealthy women's voices again. "Why is he wasting his time here? He should be dining at the hotel, not sitting with her," one said sharply. Another added, "She must think this will change her life. But she will always be nothing more than the poor girl." Clara's heart ached, but she forced herself to keep working. She could not let their words weaken her spirit. Jonathan, however, had heard them too. His jaw tightened, but he stayed silent. He did not want to cause a scene, but inside he made a quiet decision. These people did not see Clara's worth, but he did. He would show her that kindness and honesty mattered more than wealth and status. The next few days, Jonathan returned to the diner again and again. Each time he sat at the same table and ordered simple meals. Each time he spoke to Clara, asking her about her life, her dreams, her thoughts. At first she was cautious, wondering why a man like him cared to listen. But slowly she began to open up, telling him about the books she liked to read when she found time, the way she loved the open fields outside of town, and how she dreamed of a world where people were valued for their hearts, not their money. Jonathan listened closely, often smiling as she spoke. He admired her more each day. She reminded him of the very things he had come back to find: honesty, humility, and strength. Meanwhile, gossip in the town grew louder. People whispered about the rancher and the poor girl. Some were amused, others angry, and many were simply jealous. The wealthy women who had mocked Clara most often were furious. "This is ridiculous," one of them hissed. "He cannot possibly see her as worthy." But deep inside, they feared exactly that. One evening, as Clara left the diner after a long shift, Jonathan was waiting outside. He tipped his hat respectfully and offered to walk her home. Clara's eyes widened in surprise. "Sir, you don't need to trouble yourself," she said quickly. Jonathan replied calmly, "It is no trouble. Besides, I would like to see the streets through your eyes." They walked slowly through the quiet town, the lamps casting soft glows along the path. Clara told him stories of her childhood, of playing by the river, of how her father used to sing before he passed away. Jonathan listened, his heart moved by her gentle voice and the strength behind her words. When they reached her small wooden house, Clara thanked him sincerely. He looked at the house, then back at her, and said softly, "You have more courage than anyone I know." Clara lowered her eyes, unsure how to respond, and quietly slipped inside. That night, Clara sat by her mother's side, thinking of the strange kindness of the rancher. She could not understand why he kept coming back, why he listened to her when no one else ever had. She only knew that his presence made her heart beat faster, though she dared not dream of what it meant. She told herself firmly, "Men like him do not choose women like me." But deep down, something inside her whispered that maybe, just maybe, life was beginning to change. And far away, at his grand ranch, Jonathan thought of Clara too. He knew the town saw her as poor and unworthy, but he saw something no one else did, a rare strength, a shining dignity that could not be bought with money. He knew with certainty that his life and his ranch needed someone like her. The next afternoon, the diner was quieter than usual. The lunch rush had ended, and Clara was wiping down tables with her usual focus. Her back ached from the morning shift, but her face showed no sign of the tiredness she felt. The door opened slowly, and Jonathan Hayes stepped inside. Clara felt her heart skip for a brief second, though she quickly reminded herself to stay calm. He was just a customer, she thought, though he had already shown himself to be kinder than most. He chose his usual seat by the window and gave her a nod. She walked over with her notepad in hand. "Good afternoon, sir. The same order as before?" she asked gently. Jonathan smiled, but today there was something different in his eyes, something more serious. "Not today," he replied. "Today I came to talk to you if you'll allow it." Clara hesitated, looking around at the nearly empty diner. Only two old men sat at the counter, sipping coffee and speaking in low voices. The manager was in the back room. For once, the place was quiet enough for a conversation. Clara nodded slowly. "I can spare a few minutes," she said. Jonathan leaned forward slightly, his hands folded on the table. "Clara, I've been watching you work these past days. I see how hard you work, how patient you are with every customer even when they don't treat you with respect. I've seen how you care for people without expecting anything in return." Clara's cheeks grew warm. She wasn't used to hearing kind words directed at her. "I just do my duty," she said softly. He studied her face for a moment before speaking again. "My ranch is large, Clara. It needs not just workers, but someone with a strong heart, someone who can bring order and kindness to the people who live and work there." "My ranch needs a woman like you." Clara froze. For a moment she thought she had misheard him. She looked at him in disbelief, her voice almost a whisper. "A woman like me? Sir, surely you must be mistaken. I am no one important. I am only a waitress who serves food and tries to make ends meet. People in this town laugh at me every day. How could I possibly belong on a ranch like yours? Jonathan's eyes never wavered. That is exactly why I chose you, he said calmly. Because you do not let pride or wealth guide your heart. You know the value of hard work and dignity. Those qualities are rare, Clara. Money can buy land, but it cannot buy character. You have what money cannot give. Clara shook her head slightly, still unable to believe his words. But sir, what will people say? They already mock me. They will laugh louder if they see me walking beside you. They will say I don't belong. Jonathan's voice grew firmer. Let them laugh, Clara. Their laughter does not change the truth. And the truth is, I need someone I can trust. I have seen enough false smiles and greedy hands in my life. When I look at you, I see honesty. That is worth more than gold to me. Clara felt her heart beating hard in her chest. Part of her longed to accept his words, to believe that he truly saw something in her. But another part of her was afraid. She thought of her sick mother waiting at home, of the medicine bills that had drained their savings. Could she even think of leaving her side? Clara lowered her gaze and said, I cannot leave my mother. She depends on me. I cannot abandon her. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, understanding in his eyes. And you should not. I would never ask you to abandon your family. If you come to the ranch, your mother will be cared for. She will have the medicine she needs, and she will never want for comfort. I will make sure of that. Clara's breath caught in her throat. She searched his face for any sign of mockery, any hint that he was making false promises. But all she saw was calm sincerity. Her mind was filled with doubt and hope at the same time. At that moment, the door to the diner opened and the group of wealthy women entered, their perfume filling the air. They spotted Jonathan immediately and rushed to greet him, their voices loud and eager. Mr. Hayes! What a surprise to see you here again, one of them said sweetly, ignoring Clara as if she didn't exist. They tried to crowd around his table, offering smiles and laughter. Clara stepped back, embarrassed, not wanting to be in the way, but Jonathan's next words silenced the room. He turned to the women and said, loud enough for them to hear, I was just speaking to Clara. She is a woman of great strength, and I believe she has something no one else here possesses. The women's smiles froze, their eyes flashing with disbelief. One of them sneered, Her? She is nothing but a poor waitress. Jonathan's expression hardened. That poor waitress, as you call her, has more dignity than many who wear jewels and silks. She is exactly the kind of person I want at my ranch. The room grew tense. The wealthy women exchanged shocked glances, whispering furiously among themselves. Clara stood speechless, her hands trembling slightly. She wanted to run away, to hide from the stares, but Jonathan's steady presence gave her strength. After the women left in a storm of whispers, Jonathan looked at Clara again. You see, Clara? They cannot see your worth, but I do. I want you to come to my ranch. Not as a servant, not as someone beneath me, but as someone who will stand by my side to make it better. Clara's throat tightened. She wanted to believe him, but years of being treated as less had made her cautious. Why me, sir? Out of all the women in this town, why choose me? Jonathan smiled gently. Because you remind me of what truly matters. When I was in the city, I was surrounded by people who only wanted my wealth. Their words were empty, their hearts cold. But you, Clara, you serve coffee with a smile even to those who mock you. You care for your mother with love even when no one sees your struggle. You are real. That is why. Tears welled in Clara's eyes, though she quickly blinked them away. She whispered, I don't know what to say. Jonathan stood up, placing his hat on his head. You don't have to answer now. Think about it. I will wait for your decision. But know this, my ranch needs a woman like you, Clara, and I believe your heart belongs somewhere greater than where people laugh at you. With those words, he left the diner, leaving Clara standing there with her heart racing. She felt a storm of emotions inside, fear, hope, disbelief, and something she dared not name. For the first time in her life, someone had seen beyond her patched dress and her humble home. Someone had spoken to her as if she mattered, truly mattered. That night, as she sat beside her mother, Clara told her everything. Her mother listened carefully, her eyes shining with wisdom. When Clara finished, her mother squeezed her hand gently. My dear child, life does not give us many chances. Sometimes it opens a door we never thought could exist. You have always carried yourself with strength and grace. Perhaps this is the moment when your kindness is finally seen for what it is. Do not let fear steal it from you. Clara sat in silence, her heart heavy yet light at the same time. She looked out the window at the night sky, the stars shining brightly above. She thought of the ranch, the fields, the horses, and Jonathan's steady eyes. She did not know what her decision would be yet, but deep in her heart she knew this was the turning point of her life. The next week passed in a blur for Clara. She had never been so torn between fear and hope in her life. Each morning she went to the diner as usual, wearing her patched dress and tying her hair neatly back, but her mind was far away. Jonathan's words echoed again and again in her heart. "My ranch needs a woman like you." At first she had thought it was kindness spoken to encourage her, but the way he had defended her in front of those wealthy women had been no small gesture. He had meant every word. Her mother noticed the way Clara's eyes often drifted toward the window, as though she were dreaming of a horizon beyond their small wooden home. "Clara," her mother said one evening, holding her hand, "do not let the voices of cruel people make you believe you are less than what you are. If this man truly sees your worth, maybe you should give yourself a chance to see it too." Finally, Clara gathered the courage to visit the ranch. It was a long walk from town, and she had never been there before. When she reached the gates, her breath caught in her throat. The land stretched far and wide, rolling hills covered in green grass, herds of horses grazing in the distance, and barns that stood tall and strong against the horizon. It was like stepping into another world. Jonathan greeted her at the entrance, his face lighting up when he saw her. "You came," he said warmly. Clara nodded shyly, her voice quiet. "I wanted to see it with my own eyes." He walked beside her, showing her the vast ranch. Workers tipped their hats respectfully as they passed, though Clara could sense some of them whispering. She knew they wondered why a simple girl from the diner was walking beside their wealthy employer. Jonathan ignored the whispers. Instead, he explained how the ranch worked, how the cattle were raised, how the horses were trained, and how the workers and their families lived in the small houses nearby. Then he said something that surprised her. "Clara, I don't want you to be just a visitor here. I want you to help me run this place. Not because I can't manage it, but because I believe you can bring something here that money cannot buy. Compassion, fairness, and warmth." Clara's eyes widened. "But I don't know anything about running a ranch," she admitted. "All I know is how to serve food and clean tables." Jonathan shook his head. "You know more than that. You know how to treat people with respect. You know how to keep order in the busiest of places. You know how to listen, how to encourage, and how to care. Those qualities are exactly what this ranch needs." Though his words touched her heart, Clara was still unsure. She worried about being mocked again, this time not just in town but also by the ranch workers. She could already feel their doubtful eyes on her. As days turned into weeks, Clara began spending more time at the ranch. At first, the workers looked at her with suspicion. They whispered among themselves, "What does a poor girl from town know about a place like this?" Some laughed quietly behind her back, thinking she would not last a week. Clara heard the whispers, but she held her head high. She remembered how she had endured such words before. If she was going to prove herself, she would do it with patience and work, not anger. She began by helping in small ways, organizing supplies in the kitchens, listening to the workers' wives when they spoke of their struggles, and making sure the children of the ranch had food and clean clothes. Slowly, people began to notice her efforts. She did not demand attention or respect, but it grew naturally as her actions spoke louder than any words. One day, when a storm struck suddenly, flooding part of the stables, Clara rushed into the rain with the workers to help save the animals. She was soaked to the bone, her hair plastered to her face, but she worked tirelessly, guiding frightened horses to safety and carrying buckets of water out. The workers watched in surprise. They had expected her to stay behind, perhaps hiding in the warmth of the house, but instead she had been shoulder to shoulder with them, sharing their burden. From that day, whispers of doubt began to fade. Respect grew in its place. Jonathan often stood in the distance, watching her with quiet pride. He had always believed she had the heart for this life, and now he saw her proving it every day. In the evenings, they would walk together through the fields, speaking of their dreams for the future. Clara often shared her ideas of how the ranch could support the town's poor families by sharing milk, vegetables, and extra supplies. Jonathan listened closely, taking her suggestions seriously. But in town, the wealthy women who had mocked Clara were furious. They had expected her to fail quickly, to be sent away in embarrassment. Instead, Word spread that she had become an important part of the ranch, respected by the workers and trusted by Jonathan himself. The women whispered angrily in the diner, "How dare she think she belongs there? It will not last. He will see soon enough that she is not fit for that life." Clara heard the whispers whenever she returned to town, but now they cut less deeply. For every cruel word, there was the memory of a worker's wife thanking her for food, or a child's smile when she taught them how to read in the evenings. These moments became her strength. Still, the journey was not easy. There were days when Clara doubted herself, when she wondered if she truly belonged. She would sit by her mother's bed at night, confessing her fears. Her mother would always reassure her with gentle words. "My daughter, you were born for more than mockery. If Jonathan sees your worth, it is because your worth has always been there. Do not hide it anymore." Clara carried those words with her. She worked harder each day, her confidence growing quietly like the roots of a tree. She no longer looked down when people mocked her. She no longer questioned if she deserved respect. She proved it step by step through her actions. One evening, Jonathan called all the ranch workers together in the big barn. He stood before them and spoke firmly. "This ranch has always been strong, but it is stronger now because of the woman who has stood among you. Clara has worked tirelessly, not as someone above you, but as one of you. She has cared for your families, worked beside you, and shown what true leadership looks like." The workers clapped, some even cheered. Clara's face burned with humility, but her heart swelled with pride. She had not asked for recognition, but hearing their approval filled her with courage. After the gathering, Jonathan turned to her, his voice soft but steady. "Clara, do you see now? You were never too poor. You were never unworthy. You are exactly what this ranch and perhaps my life has needed." Clara lowered her eyes, her heart racing. She still struggled to believe such words, but deep inside she knew they were true. She had faced storms, whispers, and doubt, but she had not been broken. Instead, she had begun to bloom in a place she never thought she would stand. And though she did not yet know what the future held, Clara understood one thing with certainty. She had finally begun to see herself the way Jonathan had seen her from the very first moment. The day of the community gathering arrived with a golden sun rising over the hills. Jonathan had planned it for weeks, inviting not just wealthy families but also ranch workers, farmers, merchants, and even the poorest in town. It was his way of opening the ranch gates to everyone, breaking the invisible walls of class that had divided the town for so long. Clara had been nervous about it from the moment he told her, but she also knew she could not hide. The ranch was her home now, and she had to stand tall in front of all those who once mocked her. The ranch yard was decorated with simple but beautiful touches. Long wooden tables were set with fresh bread, roasted meat, fruits, and pitchers of milk. Children ran across the grass, laughing as they played, while workers and their families mingled happily. Slowly, carriages arrived carrying the wealthy families of the town. The women stepped down in their glittering dresses, their eyes sharp as they scanned the gathering. Some smiled politely, others whispered behind fans, and many turned their gaze toward Clara. Clara had chosen to wear her best dress, one she had carefully mended many times, but she carried herself with dignity. She stood beside Jonathan as guests arrived, greeting people with a warm smile. Her heart raced with nerves, but she kept her posture steady. When a wealthy woman whispered, "Look at her pretending to belong here," Clara did not flinch. Instead, she turned to offer bread to a group of children nearby, her kindness silencing the cruel words better than any argument could. Jonathan noticed her calm strength and felt proud. He knew the townspeople were watching closely, waiting for a sign that she did not belong. But Clara's grace under their stares proved more powerful than their gossip. He leaned toward her and whispered, "Today they will see you for who you truly are." As the afternoon went on, people enjoyed the food and music. Workers spoke warmly of Clara, sharing how she had helped them during the storm or how she had listened to their families' needs. Some of the merchants nodded in respect, surprised by her growing influence. The wealthy women, however, could not hide their displeasure. They gathered in small circles, their whispers filled with envy. "This is outrageous," one muttered. "She was nothing but a poor girl from the diner. How dare she stand beside him?" Another replied bitterly. "He will embarrass himself if he continues to praise her." Finally, Jonathan called for attention. He stood at the center of the gathering, his tall frame commanding silence. Clara stood slightly behind him, her hands folded nervously, her heart pounding in her chest. Jonathan's voice carried across the yard, calm but powerful. "Friends and neighbors, thank you for coming today. This ranch has always been a place of hard work, but I wanted it to be more. A place of community, of respect, of kindness. And I want to tell you that the reason this dream has begun to grow is not because of me, but because of someone else." He turned toward Clara, his eyes filled with warmth. "This woman beside me has shown more strength and dignity than anyone I have ever met. When others mocked her, she stood tall. When storms came, she worked harder than anyone else. She has cared for families, guided children, and given this ranch a heart it did not have before. She has reminded me that wealth is nothing without compassion." The crowd stirred, murmurs rippling through the people. Clara's face flushed, but she did not look down. She felt Jonathan's words surround her like a shield, protecting her from every cruel whisper she had ever endured. Jonathan raised his voice slightly. "Some of you may see her as poor, as unworthy. But I tell you this, her character is worth more than gold. She is not just part of this ranch. She is its soul. And today I want everyone to know that she is the woman I have been searching for. The one I trust, the one I admire, and the one I choose to stand beside me." Gasps filled the air. Some people clapped immediately, the workers cheering loudly, their voices filled with genuine joy. The wealthy women turned pale, their mouths tightening as they realized their whispers no longer mattered. They had laughed at Clara for years, but now the richest man in the region was praising her in front of the whole community. Clara's eyes filled with tears, though she quickly blinked them back. She stepped forward slowly, her voice trembling but steady enough to be heard. I never thought I would stand here today. All my life, people told me I was less, that I did not belong. But I learned that what matters is not wealth or fine clothes, but how we treat one another. Kindness is richer than gold, and dignity is stronger than mockery. If I can give this ranch anything, it will be those simple truths." The yard grew quiet, and then applause broke out louder than before. The workers clapped, farmers cheered, and even some merchants joined in. The sound carried across the open fields, drowning out every cruel word that had ever been spoken against her. The wealthy women stood stiffly, their faces red with frustration, but even they could not stop the tide of respect growing around Clara. For the first time, they saw that their power of mockery had no place here. Jonathan placed his hand gently on Clara's shoulder and said with a firm voice, "She is not just the heart of this ranch, she is the future I have chosen." His words left no room for doubt. From that day on, Clara's life changed completely. No longer was she just the poor girl from the diner. She became known as the woman who had transformed the ranch with her kindness and strength. People came to her for advice, workers trusted her, and children adored her. Even those who had once mocked her lowered their heads when they passed, unable to deny the respect she had earned. But for Clara, the greatest change was not in how others saw her. The greatest change was in how she saw herself. She no longer carried only the weight of survival. She carried pride, dignity, and hope. She realized that Jonathan had not given her worth. He had only recognized what had been there all along. At night, when she sat by her mother's bed, her mother would smile with tears in her eyes. "You see, my child," she whispered, "life did reward your kindness. You were always meant for more than their laughter." Clara would hold her mother's hand and smile, knowing it was true. The ranch flourished in the months that followed, not just with strong harvests and healthy animals, but with a new spirit. It became a place where the poor were welcomed, where families found support, and where kindness replaced cruelty. Clara's influence reached beyond the fences of the ranch, touching the town that had once mocked her. And though there were still whispers now and then, they no longer mattered. Clara had risen above them, proving that true worth comes not from riches or fine clothes, but from the quiet strength of a kind heart.